Hello, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Communities in Place, Policy and Scrutiny, and a lot of others are attending too this evening. Thank you. I'm Councillor Finnegan, and I will be chairing this meeting this evening. I'm supported by directors and a large number of others here this evening, and the chair of the Finance Scrutiny also. I think we first off will start off with an introduction, please. Thank you.
Hello, Paul Anderson, Director of Communities.
And Barbara Childs, Director of Place.
Catherine Howe, Head of Strategic Planning and Sustainability.
Matt Bates, Planning Policy Team Leader.
Hal Kleiman, Principal Planning Policy Officer.
Laura Parker, Head of Recycling and Waste.
Ruth Fletcher, Cabinet Member for Planning and Infrastructure.
Mark Bainham, I'm the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, but I'm here to cover environment and waste today.
Thank you. And then to my left.
Paul Clark, Chairman of Performance and Finance Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting.
Judy Carboni, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. Just to remind everybody, we're being live streamed and the broadcast will be available on the Council's YouTube channel. First, a little bit of housekeeping. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if you hear one, please make your way to the nearest fire exits and the central point outside the Witherspoons pub, Lynn Cross, just outside. May I remind everybody to please switch off your mobile phones or turn them to silent. And if members want to speak, can you please press the button when you start and then turn it off afterwards, but clearly raise your hands. It's quite difficult to see everybody here this evening. Thank you. Item number 1 is apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Beard, Grant and Croker. Judy, do you have any others, please?
I do. I have apologies from Councillor Sam Bateman, from Councillor Dennis Livingstone, and from the Finance and Policy and Scrutiny Committee. I have apologies from Councillor Tony Bevis and Councillor Claire Vickers.
Thank you. I also understand we're expecting Councillor Minto, but he'll be arriving a little bit later this evening. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 2, the minutes. Thank you again, Judy, for producing the minutes. They're on pages 3 to 6 of your pack. All comments should be received in advance of the meeting, but do we have any comments on the previous minutes? No, well, I've read them and I'm happy to say they're an accurate reflection of our meeting on the 10th of June, and I'll sign those after the meeting, Judy. Thank you. Actions from our last meeting, it wasn't that long ago. We're going to have those actions addressed on our next meeting on the 9th of September. Item number 4 is declarations of interest. Can you please let me know if you've got any declarations of interest on the items this evening? No, that's no, thank you. And we'll check with Colin Minto when he returns. Thank you. Announcements, which is item number 5. I don't have any of those. And number 6, responses to the full council, none of those either. So we move on to the main first main agenda item today, item number 7, resolution of call-in decisions to continue the waste, electrical and electronic equipment, textiles and coffee pod bookable collection service. We are considering matters referred to the committee for a resolution in relation to a call-in decision, pages 7 to 12 of your pack. We have a clear process of how we're going to be addressing this evening, so I'm going to run through that quickly so you understand what we're doing. First of all, an introduction for myself. I will then ask Councillor Clark to invite him to outline the reasons for a call-in and set out what he considers should be reviewed. Ward councillors who are not members of the Scrutiny Community in Place are then given an opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes, setting out how the decision impacts their ward. Councillor Bainham, who is deputising for Councillor Skip, has an opportunity to respond. Laura Parker and Paul Anderson will have an opportunity to provide background and context to the decision and explain the importance of achieving service priorities. We'll then go to a wider committee members, have an opportunity to ask questions, and then Councillor Bailey will have a final response to comment. I will then ask somebody to put forward a resolution in line with the recommendations in the report. So the committee is being asked to consider a call-in request relating to decisions taken by a Cabinet Member for Environment, Health, Recycling and Waste to discontinue directly provided HDC bookable service for collection of wee, textiles and coffee pods, and to provide the service through a charity instead. I'm going to ask now Councillor Clark, sorry, thank for a second, to say why he's going to call in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Under Rule 2.12.5.1 of the Constitution, I received a request to call this decision informally from 2 members and by hearsay from a 3rd member. After being contacted by the members, I looked into the matters raised, researched the evidence and the arguments presented in the paper. Based on reviewing the decision and the data presented to substantiate it, I decided, after discussion with the chair of ONS committee in place, Councillor Finnegan, to call this in to be reviewed and looked at. In summary, the evidence presented in the Cabinet paper to justify the decision was inadequate or lacking. And furthermore, there was a lack of sufficient stakeholder engagement insofar that users of the service were not consulted. In addition, there was concern over the timing of the publishing of the paper and the timescales involved in terms of compared to what we normally do. So I decided as chairman of Oversight and Scrutiny, Finance and Performance Policy to call this in. In the detail, there'd been no consultation of members or users of the service, and the decision was made on the day of the meeting of the ONS committee on the Wednesday the 10th and published the next day. The ONS Finance and Policy meeting was held on Monday the 8th, and the report should have been ready by the 10th, affording officers and cabinet member time to notify either of the 2 chairs of ONS. It's not as if it was an urgent decision, and there are protocols for that. There was no opportunity to scrutinise or question the decision. And the notification system of cabinet decisions didn't flag it either. The report cited providing a better service cost savings, better use of depot space and risk reduction on agreements. The thing is, though, that this is a service that is customer focused, so it's basically people out there are potentially affected by it. It's not an internal service, albeit it's a small part of our recycling schemes. So the service is a useful addition, or was a useful addition, for what is normally provided. And while not statutory, it is customer visible, which is the point. And to remove it without consultation or scrutiny is neither transparent nor open and learning, which is what this administration professes. The report basically gave the impression that it was a better option for the public than what we're already providing. And it claimed that Anglo Recycling would provide like-for-like service. This is what I dug up in the investigation. However, minimal verification would have shown that this was not the case, as Anglo Recycling do not take back broken items, for example. So we weren't getting a better or equivalent service as a result of the decision as was claimed. The Cabinet report made the point that it would save costs. It wasn't actually clear when I dug into it, but it was clarified later by officers that in fact, yes, the operative in the van would be used elsewhere. So technically it was no saving, but there was a saving because it was budgeted to take on an extra van and extra operative. So yeah, it was a saving, but it was a theoretical one, and it certainly wasn't clear in the report. It was only after following it up that it came out. The reason and logic for terminating the podback service is supported by evidence and proof. It's not a problem. I mean, it made sense. So all in all, reassignment of experienced staff, that was fine, increased yard space at the depot. But there is a problem when we go further down with the electricals recycling. So limiting the risk of operating with Podback or Cox Electricals recycling without contracts in place to protect us, which is based on goodwill. I can understand where that is. and getting rid of the pods recycling, that was fine. But if you looked at the waste electrical and whatever it is, and fabrics, again, here we have the issue of broken and non-functioning so to speak. And in fact, what was proposed in the paper was a worse service because the people who are going to take over the service don't take broken and non-functioning as I understood it at the time. In events, emails later on basically didn't substantiate what was in the paper. So elimination risk to cease the service due to volatility within the current textiles market is understandable in a way. It's a cogent, but the textile market is very volatile. The volumes remained important, but again, our service appears to be more complete because Anglo doesn't take nightwear, bedding, socks, and underwear or rugs. I believe, but I still not have it. I'm not sure. So officers can confirm that our service does take these things. So basically, the problems were the process of publishing the decision and bringing the decision forward and agreeing the decision, and the evidence and logic of the paper and the facts presented could have been done better, in my opinion. So that's why I called it in. Thank you. If I have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I think first of all, we're now going to move to ward councillors who are not members of this scrutiny communities in place to give an opportunity for them to speak on this item. So we have finance at the back, and we have also Councillor Noel and Walters as well. Any questions? Thank you. So Councillor Baynham, would you like to have any comments on that?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think as an administration, we're big enough to accept if we've made an error. And we do accept that we have made an error in terms of the process of this decision. It shouldn't have gone quite the way it did. We didn't really intend that to happen, but that's what did happen. However, we have recognised that, and we have taken remedial measures for future decisions so the same thing doesn't occur again. But even though the process was probably at fault, that doesn't invalidate the correctness of the decision itself. What we have is a service that provides recycling that was now costing us money to run, where we have an alternative which essentially provides a similar service to residents, not run by the council, but nevertheless a similar service which does not cost the council anything. And I think it would be remiss, I'm just putting on my finance hat for the moment, to run a service at cost when there is an alternative available without cost, and we would therefore be continuing to unnecessarily spend taxpayers' money. So I think that is a key consideration here. As far as the broken items, well, in the initial discussions with Anglo, which is the third party, it was assumed, turned out incorrectly in the end, that they would actually collect the broken items. But when it transpired that that wasn't the case, we quickly moved to create another pickup option, which will be carried out by an existing member of staff as part of their general normal duties. So actually at no extra cost to the council. The only change now to the system that was there before would be that not all the coffee pods are collected free of charge. So it's less than half. It depends what brand of coffee pod you use. But the majority of them are available to be picked up by Royal Mail at no charge. And for those that whose service that does not exist, then there are many coffee pod collection points, both at supermarkets and at our amenity tip. And I don't think for the sake of, not many coffee pods, frankly, in terms of actual volume, that would justify the expense of continuing to run the service. I don't know whether the officers wish to add anything to what I've said, but you may wish to ask them.
Thank you, Councillor Bainham. So there's an acceptance that there was a bit of a process error. We're offering a similar service. There is an element of broken wee which wasn't picked up, which is now going to be done by HDC under an existing route. Can I just ask, it might be to the officers or to yourself, that is it going to be clear to customers how to book? So if they've got a broken piece of wee, is it clear on a website which avenue they go down for collection?
I haven't actually looked at the website today, so I can't give you that answer, but maybe I can refer that to officers.
Laura, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so we'll have a plan where the residents will still go to the same site they do now on the website, and then it will be clear questions as in, is your wee working or is it not working? They'll be directed to the correct line, so that from a resident's point of view, they'll be following the same process they do now.
Thank you. Just one other question from me quickly. Textiles, we've had bedding mentioned, we've had sort of underwear mentioned, all other bits and pieces, and torn clothing. Is there a difference to the service that we're going to be having now?
So the only difference is, so rugs aren't considered as a textile anyway, so they wouldn't be taken by either service. So nightwear, that won't be taken by Anglo. That is one thing we would take, but the rest of it, which is underwear and socks, even though we would pick it up, it wouldn't be reused. And the same with nightwear as well. It's just Anglo specified they don't want to take it, whereas we would pick it up, but then it would go to processing in a different way and wouldn't be reused anyway.
Thank you very much. Any other feedback from yourself, Paul?
I just wanted to make clear that we got the process wrong. We recognise we got the process wrong. That's on me. I apologise. We won't repeat it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to the wider committee members now and give them an opportunity to ask questions. Councillor Circus, your hands first.
Thank you very much. This decision seems to be based on a number of assertions which I think are questionable. It costs money. Well, all recycling costs money. If we wanted to save money, we wouldn't recycle at all. But then, of course, we're under government. We're under the government pressure to recycle, and also all sides of this council believe in recycling because it's part of our belief in responsible stewardship of the planet. Another point to make is that nothing really, as I understand it from experience in other authorities, compares with curbside collections. We know that the volume of material collected is always more with a curbside collection rather than collections that involve taking materials to somewhere else. All recycling is volatile. There's nothing peculiar about these materials. All materials collected in recycling are subject to volatility. So with great respect, that's not an argument. The issue about broken wee is it's irrelevant because the value, as I understand it, is in the rare metals that are contained within the wee, and that's the important thing. It's extracting, and the amount of the value of rare minerals and metals that have been lost because they've been part of the general waste stream is quite considerable. And that's in part why we introduced this scheme, because it was to discourage people from putting electricals. They're told not to put electricals in their general waste bin. They're told they should take it to the civic amenity sites. In practice, it's easier to put it into the general waste bin unless you have specific curbside collection. I think, and it's, if somebody in responding could tell me, I believe Crawley and Mid Sussex, they did, because I remember, I think I was the cabinet member when we made the decision to start recycling of these materials. And we were influenced to some extent by the fact that other authorities in West Sussex were already doing it. I think Mid Sussex is doing it. And Crawley, I believe, was doing it. So it'd be useful to know whether those two authorities and any more are actually continuing to collect curbside these materials when we are potentially discontinuing. I'm glad that Councillor Bainham acknowledges that the process was wrong. Clearly it was wrong because as councillors we woke up one day and suddenly found the decision had been made. So I didn't get the opportunity to discuss it with officers, which normally I would do as the Conservative group member with responsibility for waste and issues and recycling. So we can see demonstrably there are irregularities in the process. What I don't accept is the assertion that despite the process mistakes, the decision was right. I don't think the decision was right. At the very least, it needs thoroughly investigating. And I think members need to have a greater degree of participation in the re-examination. And what I would suggest, Chairman, is that I would hope that the result of our deliberations today will be that we ask that the decision and process is taken back and reconsidered fully. And I think all the evidence to me warrants that, and I hope other members will feel likewise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Serkis. Well, we'll look at the recommendations when we finish the debate. I will ask Paul Anderson to respond with regards to the curbside Crawley and Mid Sussex question that you had.
Can I just clarify 2 points? We did share the report with you before it was published, and you acknowledged that. So it was shared with you as shadow cabinet member before the decision was made by the cabinet member.
Well, if I remember right, I just acknowledged to say thank you for sending it to me. But in fact, it was far too late, as I remember it, to have any chance of influencing in any way the decision that had clearly been made.
Secondly, just to clarify, we're not withdrawing the curbside service. The curbside collection service will remain for every product with the exception of the pod back. So the coffee pod recycling. I don't know if Laura's got anything to add.
Yeah, so with the coffee pods, half of them, if you use Nespresso, you'll be able to use a Royal Mail service as well. So that is at the curbside. So it's probably half of the users that will have to find another way to recycle them. There's currently points at all the recycling centres and a supermarket in Horsham, and we will work with Podback to introduce more places that they can take their pods to as well. The reason we don't have that at the moment is because obviously we're running the curbside service, but if we do remove that, there'll be some more collection points put in.
Thank you.
Can I
Councillor
just make
Serkis,
one
come up here.
small further comment? I was at Billingshurst Tip the other day, and I overheard somebody come and say to one of the staff, "I've got these textiles." And the answer he got from the staff was, "Put it in the residual waste, the household waste bin," which is obviously not the right answer from our point of view. And I think that shows you what can happen if you depart from curbside collections.
Councillor, I know for myself, Councillor Serkis, that the value that you get from textile waste is very low these days. After jumble sales and things, I collect waste or fabrics. If they're in peak condition, you can now only get about 40 pence, and that's probably reduced since I did it last October. It used to be £1 and is now really reduced. So I think the amount of money actually got from that, and the quality of the fabrics has to be very good as well.
Yeah, so with textiles, we used to get maybe 2,000 a year for them. Last year that dropped down to only £140. So it just sort of shows the how volatile the market is at the moment. A lot of it's to do with fast fashion and not being able to recycle some of the products like we used to be able to. With a comment about the textiles at the Billingshurst site, I'll obviously raise that with West Sussex. It could be that they said the textiles are wet or damaged, which means they couldn't be reused, so they would have been advised to put them in the residual if that was the case. But I'll definitely raise it with West Sussex.
Thank you, Laura. Anybody else want to have a discussion point? Yes, Councillor Hogben.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the Cabinet Member and the Director for their comments. Obviously, this has evolved very quickly, but I share Councillor Clark's frustration that how we got here. This Cabinet Member decision wasn't put before any members. It wasn't put before either Policy and Scrutiny Committee, and I personally didn't have sight of it until I got the Cabinet Member's decision report. And with the greatest of respect, the was it 1.5 page pamphlet lacked substance, lacked fact, lacked anything. And I can empathise, because obviously I was a Cabinet Member, that when a decision is an easy decision, is a no-brainer, it's not necessarily needed to be supported with a lot of facts to back it up. But this particular decision to cut a frontline service and a customer-facing scenario, I felt did need more substance and did need more fact behind it. The financial case didn't appear to stack up. There was no budget line. There was no budget reduction. And more alarm bells started ringing as I read the report. And that was around. I guess I've got my finance hat on, and that's that. We've got, I think it's £5.5 million in finance reserves allocated towards simplified recycling, and I think we're going to struggle to spend that as a council. I think that reserve is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we've got a lot of money to invest in recycling, increasing recycling services. And that was one of the questions I asked, which hasn't been answered by the Cabinet Member, although so far. How are we planning to spend that money? And I guess what I still haven't heard tonight is there was a tonnage in that report that said the amount of tonnage we get from and that's costing £100,000. I don't know whether that's value for money. We've heard Councillor Serkis say that all recycling costs money, and is that an acceptable? Was £100,000 for that level of tonnage recycling acceptable? So I appreciate that we have evolved greatly, and thank you to the Director and thank you for the Cabinet Member for admitting that some things didn't happen. And I have seen in the last 3 weeks since I raised this that we're now getting an email with the up and coming Cabinet Members decisions, which is great, similar to the forward plan. I think obviously the only thing that was missing was that this wasn't presented in front of our two chairs of scrutiny, because I'm sure if it hadn't been presented in front of either of them, I'm sure they would have both raised some questions. And I'd like to think that we're all singing off the same hymn sheet, that every political party in this room wants to increase recycling, and that we're all trying to move in the same direction. So I'm with Councillor Serkis that we still have some more questions to answer. So we've got the money, the simplified waste reserves, how they're going to be spent. other than that, I'm reasonably happy that this has evolved. I think it was absolutely right to call this decision in. I think that there wasn't enough information on that original cabinet report, and I'm thoroughly pleased that we're here discussing it. Whether it's very quick and we're almost done, it's just a reflection, and the fact that we have got an updated email each week telling us the up and cabinet member decisions is great. I can reflect that if we still had PDAGs and policy advisory committees, this probably would have been taken to a policy advisory committee and it probably would have been discussed. So this does feel a slight backward step that we're having to scrutinise this after the fact. And, some members asking decisions would have saved us perhaps getting a little bit of egg on our face and having to evolve. But I'm very pleased with what officers have done in offering to collect the WEEs and the fact it isn't a reduction in service. Councillor Dorr, one of the former leaders of this council, said we shouldn't necessarily do anything that the private sector does if the private sector can do it better than us. And if that's the case in this instance, that the charity collection services are doing it better, selling it, making some money, then I'm reasonably supportive as long as we're not reducing our overall cycling tonnage and as long as it is a justifiable expense. And I still come back to the fact that we've got £5.5 million to reduce to spend on recycling. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hogben. I think it's all been acknowledged that the process didn't go smoothly this time. I think for sure that Councillor McClark, myself, if we'd seen it on the upcoming decisions, we would have had it on our scrutiny committee. It's here now, at least, so we can address things. Would somebody like to, I don't know if it's Councillor Bainham, want to respond with regards to the £5.5 million?
Well, I mean, with respect, Chair, I think what we're spending the reserves on is quite irrelevant to the discussion about whether we keep or don't keep this particular item, because we are talking about providing a service at a cost that is provided elsewhere at no cost. And as I said before, what responsible public body is going to spend taxpayers' money on something that it doesn't have to do without reducing the service? As to where the reserves go, that is something for the Finance and Scrutiny Committee when we're discussing budgets. It's not for this agenda item. And secondly, just to pick up on Councillor Serkis's points, I mean, he says that recycling costs money. Well, if somebody else is going to fund that, then great. Secondly, his main complaint about the service appeared to be because it wasn't a curbside collection service anymore, when we've heard very clearly that it is, and there's no change. So I acknowledge the process issues that Councillor Serkis made, but in terms of the decision itself, I'd only repeat that it doesn't change the fact that it is clearly the correct decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bainham. I think Councillor Clark would like to come back on that quickly.
Thank you. Yeah, well, with all due respect to the Cabinet Member for Finance, it's all very well to say that, but the proposal as set out in the decision at the time did not provide the same or a better service. It, in fact, provided a worse service, and it's only because we called it in to scrutinise it that actually the flaws have been picked out. So you could say that now, but at the time that the report was signed off and decided by the Cabinet Member, that was not the case.
Councillor Bainham.
Yeah, the flaws that came to light we would have addressed anyway, not albeit if it had been called into this this committee or not. I mean, that's common practice, and I think the officers would actually confirm that.
I think Laura would like to speak on that.
Yes, I can confirm that. I mean, as soon as it came to light, we put into practice and found something that we could still offer without costing any more money. So, we worked around as quickly as we could and came up with to be able to collect the broken WEE with another service that we currently run.
I think, to be fair, that was probably picked up as part of the discussion during the call-in phase. So it might have been found out later, but it was found out early because of the comments made. Councillor Serkis, oh, sorry, it was Councillor Hogben. Did you want to come back on any of those answers?
No, the cabinet member's been reasonably firm in his assumption. Obviously, the question as to how much loss of recycling we're losing in tonnage of pod bags, I I'm reasonably happy with the information I got. I was reasonably happy a week ago with the answers to the questions that the directors and the staff have come to. It does come back to Councillor Clark's point that the situation has evolved dramatically from where the decision was made. I do feel it was the right decision to make it, and I feel that the facts that was on the cabinet paper were not fulfilling enough and lacking, and that the situation has been resolved and corrected as a result of this scrutiny committee's actions. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I suppose I'm thinking it could have been a sort of a very good news story, but it's all got a bit messed up. It's a bit of a shame. But Councillor Noel.
Am I okay to speak?
Just 1 second, it's a check and process.
Hang on.
I'm going to finish off debating within the committee members first. So is anybody else from Communities of Place got any other comments? Yes, Councillor Brooke.
Just briefly, I'd like to reiterate my gratitude to the Director of Communities and to all the other officers for acting promptly and accepting where there was an opportunity to do better and acting with urgency and clarity and honesty on that. I think that's exactly the kind of council that we all want to see, whether or not that's instigated by officers' own efforts or whether prompted by the actions of this scrutiny committee doing exactly what its job. I think we've got a situation here with wherever we felt that we could do better, we've acted to do so, and that's exactly what we'd like. One further thing, if we're sharing hearsay experience, as Councillor Circus has about his experience in Billingshurst, I'm pleased to say that recently on a big clear out of the house, I used the textile service that's provided both by West Sussex and by Horsham. The service I received from Horsham was excellent, and the advice that I got on what was acceptable to recycle and what needed to be put in general waste at the Hoppost facility run by West Sussex was also exceptional, and the staff there went out of their way to take time to explain to me what could go there. So if you could include that in your feedback there, that would also be welcome. Thank you very much. I'm sure everybody's mileage may vary.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Ellis-Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I think the important thing here is to learn the lessons from this, in that, yeah, we've got it wrong, but let's make sure we don't get it wrong next time. I think that's important, and we mustn't lose sight of the importance of overview and scrutiny, in that, yes, the officers would have corrected this, but at the point that the paper was introduced, it wasn't. And that's the important thing we must remember. So going forward, we need to learn from this to ensure that we follow due process accurately. It might only be once in 1,000 times, but it's still once.
Thank you. Councillor Circus.
Just two comments. Well, one's a comment and one's a suggestion. We mustn't get hung up on the price one gets for recycled materials. I can remember when the price of metal, waste metal, went down so badly that many people here will remember when cars were just abandoned by the roadside. And I remember a desperate bid to try and get these cleared because residents were complaining. And now, of course, the price of metal has gone up. And so I think we shouldn't be hung up on the fact that there's an inherent volatility in most, if not all, of the materials we collect for recycling. The second point is just a suggestion, Chairman. If the will of the committee is to basically see how the new procedure operates in the light of this call-in, and the process is lessons are going to be learned from the process and so forth, can I suggest that we put a date in the diary, perhaps 3 months hence, when this item will be back on the agenda and we can look at the evidence, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, so we can look at the evidence of a further period in the light of these changes. Seems to me an eminently sensible thing to do, and I hope members might feel that too. Thank you.
I think it's a good idea. I'm very happy to add that to perhaps October. Might be quite good by October to have a bit of feedback.
No objection. I mean, it depends on the decision the
Yeah.
committee comes to tonight and if and when we implement the change.
Thank you. Councillor Minto, can I just ask if you got any interest on this evening's agenda items? Thank you.
Yes, I'm very interested.
Conflict of interest. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Trollope, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a lot to add, but I do sort of compare this experience to what happens to me in my career. I work in IT, and mistakes happen far more often than I would care to admit. That's why we have IT outages. But as I would say to members of my team, it's not the fact that you make a mistake, it's how you react to it. And it's how you fix it, and it's how you look at it and make sure that, you know, you learn that the mistakes never happen in a vacuum. There's usually usually more than one factors that lead up to it. And I feel confident from what I have heard this evening, that the officers have taken the failure and process seriously, and I do feel quite confident in their professionalism and that, you know, that lessons will be learned. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trollope. Yes, Councillor Butler.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's possible if we can get the data from the new third party to review whether there's been a decline in the level of recycling as a result of this change, not if we decide to continue with this.
Is that some sort of data we'll be able to get hold of, Laura?
Yes, so they already share data with us because they do offer services now. If they partnered with us, then it would be obviously more promoted through the website. All their data would be shared with us, and we can also use their tonnages to go towards our recycling tonnages as well.
Thank you.
Any other members of the committee? No. Councillor Knoll, I think you had a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Just as a postscript, really, I think this call-in was entirely warranted and exactly the right thing to do once we realised that there had been a bit of an error in judgment. But this service to our residents, having been announced in a bit of a blaze of glory some time ago, is a valuable service to our residents, and whether or not it's going to cost the council money, it must be carried on, and we should be collecting these type of recyclables. It's a valuable service to our residents. If it costs money to the finance side, then so be it. It's a mistake, but it's a mistake that has to be glossed over and carried on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Any other questions? Sorry, Ellis Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we mustn't, as a council, be seen to be wasteful with our finances, or indeed extravagant. And was the cost of this provision of this service disproportionate to the value that it offered? If that's the case, then it wasn't value for money in the first place, irrespective of what our residents thought. So we must keep that at the forefront of our mind, that was this value for money? Were we being extravagant with our money? Probably not, but were we offering a service that was wasteful with our money because it can be gained elsewhere without cost to the council?
Anybody want to come back on that? No, thank you. Councillor Bateman, you've got an opportunity to have a final comment.
I think I've said all that I need to say, Chair, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're at the stage now where we have to put forward a resolution in line with the recommendations in the report. So the committee is recommended to, one, consider the decision of the Cabinet Member for Environment, Health and Recycling and Waste to take such of the following action as deemed appropriate. A, to take no further action, in which case a decision will take effect immediately. B, to refer the decision back to the decision maker for reconsideration, setting out the nature of the committee's concerns. The decision maker must then reconsider the matter within 10 working days, taking account of the committee's concerns before making a final decision. Or C, if the decision is deemed contrary to the policy framework and or contrary to not wholly or in accordance with the budget, to refer the matter back to full council. I'm going to need to take a nomination on one of those points. Also, 1 second, please. It's just for clarification, that's the decision as is. I think we understand that. And Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to propose to members that we adopt item 2B, which is to take the decision back to the decision maker for reconsideration, setting out the nature of the committee's concerns. And then that cabinet decision maker must then reconsider the matter within 10 working days, taking into account the concerns before making a final decision, effectively correcting the report and putting in the data that has come to light effectively before redoing the decision. That's essentially what I'm proposing. Thank you, Chairman.
Just to throw something else in the mix there, the cabinet member may not be available for the next 10 working days. So we could refer potentially to the leader or to the deputy. To the leader to make a decision. So
the monitoring officer is aware.
Do you want the monitoring officer aware of this? And I think we might have to refer it to the leader rather than the cabinet member who might be away. So from what you said, but replacing that with the cabinet member with the leader to make the decision. So it's been nominated. Is there any seconder on that?
I'm seconding on the assumption that we can slightly amend it to include a review in 3 or 6 months' time of action taken as a result of reconsideration, so that we can look at how this has panned out in practice. Is that right, Chairman?
Councillor Serkis, what I've suggested that perhaps if we do agree to 2B, then I would suggest that it goes on an agenda, perhaps sort of October, when we have some information, and the tonnage information as suggested by the councillors and Laura's confirmation with the tonnage to do a comparison at that point.
Yeah, as long as that happens, that's fine.
Thank you. So we'll the agendas are getting busy, but we'll look perhaps October, November to see. Yes, part of the cabinet member's decision. Thank you. Okay, did somebody want to second that proposal? Councillor Serkis, I think he just got his hand up a bit quicker on that. If you want to second.
Thank you, Chair. Age before beauty. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's been proposed and seconded. Can we have a show of hands if we're in agreement with that proposal? Do I have to vote?
7-4. 8-4.
8-4. Any against? One against. Any abstentions? And one abstention. Thank you. Okay, so the recommendation is 2B. We're going to have that dealt with by the leader rather than the cabinet member who is currently away, and we will look to put that on a future agenda item. Thank you. For all those wanting to leave after that agenda item, please feel free to do so. We will move on to item number 8. This is the Horsham District Local Plan 2023 to 2040. Schedule of proposed main modifications. To consider the report of the Cabinet Member for Planning and Infrastructure, which was published on the 26th of June and going to be examined under additional Cabinet meeting held on the 6th of July. So I was wondering whether if the best way to deal with this, because we're going to have no doubt a lot of questions about the sites, is to break it down a little bit into, if we've got any questions on the process, then any questions on the policies, and then move on to the sites questions. So has anybody got any questions on the actual process before we move on? No questions on the process. Good. Any questions on the policies? I would just like to first of all raise a couple of small points. We have been today notified about the map for RUSPA, the supplement addendum item number 5, RUSPA insert map 29, which has been provided, is also an addition to those papers. Also, I would like to flag that the new Horsham allocation, HOR 3, reference on page 10, is called New Place Farm on page 10, but it should actually state New House Farm for consistency with pages 102 to 131. This has been confirmed with Catherine, as there is another site actually in the Paulborough neighbourhood plan with the same name referenced on page 166 and 181. Any questions on the policies? That we're moving straight to the sites. I would perhaps like just to get some clarification on I think we're being examined under the MPPF December 23, which included the legal duty to cooperate. This has now been abolished. HDC at the time strongly disagreed with Mr. Fleming's conclusion in relation to this. If we were to be examined under a new MPPF rather than the current one, would that affect the numbers? Or would we still have the sort of the coastal element? And do you now agree with the inspectors with regards to the unmet needs of Crawley and the South Coast element? And is the sort of the cross-boundary collaboration with other authorities really the same as duty to cooperate under another name? Thank you. I think, Catherine, that'd be for you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Actually, just before I answer those questions, it was just to say, obviously there's a couple of, although you said there was nothing on process, there are a couple of people that have flagged sort of minor amendments. Thank you very much for those. Obviously, if you spot others, more than happy to take that. And obviously there is a recommendation in the report which delegates authority to sort of make those minor amendments. So we can obviously continue to weave those in if we receive them. So I just thought I would helpfully clarify that point. So turning to the point around the MPPF, obviously, you know, the duty to cooperate, you're right, it has gone. We are being examined under the 2023 MPPF, and that's the situation that we find. At the moment, obviously the future MPPFs have given us you know, higher housing targets. But what they haven't done is to take away that requirement to collaborate with other authorities and seek to meet unmet needs. So although the actual sort of legal duty has fallen away, the requirement to understand whether we can meet needs from other authorities hasn't. And ultimately, I think the position that we are in is obviously the inspector in his letter to us dated the 5th of May was quite clear as to what his expectations were in terms of meeting both half of Crawley's needs and an element for the coast, and therefore that is what we needed to respond to. And clearly that did give us a very challenging target of you know, 20,100 homes as the at least figure that we were given, but that is where we find ourselves as the starting point.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to Ellis Brown.
Yeah, a question really. If the law and the statute says duty to cooperate is no longer valid or no longer necessary, then doesn't that take priority over MPPF or even the consideration of the inspector?
So the law is slightly separate to unmet needs. So if you look at the NPPF, there are clear paragraphs as to what the expectations are in terms of what makes a sound plan. And that talks about very much, it's very clear about you have to meet your own housing needs, which we've been given a target for. We also have to look to see whether we can meet unmet needs from elsewhere. So although the legal duty has fallen away, the requirement to consider other unmet needs hasn't. And that's really what the inspector has been responding to. Here's an examination of the plan, and therefore, you know, he's looking at national policy to make the plan sound. And what he is saying to us is, at the moment, as submitted, what is before him isn't sound, and that's why he is asking us to go away and find those additional housing numbers to make that requirement met. Essentially, you know, there is a huge push from government to meet that requirement, and that's what he is responding to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to site allocation, and sorry, Councillor Clark.
Sorry, you mentioned the figure 20,100. I'm a bit puzzled as to where this number comes from, because in a document dated February 2026, Appendix 1, updated trajectory document, actually the 20,100 is a high growth scenario, whereas basically the medium growth, which is what I would have expected as a target, is 19,300. So, and the low growth is 17,800. So how does this number of 20,100 figure compared to that table of February 2026, which in fact didn't, if I've read it correctly, which I may not have, which doesn't include one of the strategic sites?
Catherine?
Yeah, I think the issue is that trajectories are always a snapshot in time. So when you are looking at what housing numbers you might be able to accommodate, you are looking at what permissions have been granted, what sites might be on the books potentially coming forward, and that does change. So, but essentially what the inspector has said to us is that you need to be looking at, in terms of what he was saying is, when we were through the examination hearings in April, he was essentially what that did was to reset the dial, really, in terms of, you know, what he felt that the targets were. So he was very clear in his letter to us of, you've got 14,000 or so as our own needs, another nearly 4,000 for Crawley, and then an element for the coast, which we've obviously worked through, is about 52 a year. So that gives us a target. What he was then saying is you then need to have what he terms as headroom on top of that, which is essentially a buffer. Obviously, if you allocate housing to meet that target, of which if you add it up was around 18,000 houses, you know, things don't always happen as quickly as they might otherwise. So what he's saying is you need that sort of insurance, essentially. And therefore, what he was saying in his letter is that really, therefore, in terms of finding that buffer, you should be looking for that upper target, which was set out in terms of the figures and the numbers, which was around the 20,000 number. So that hopefully, I think, clarifies where that has come from.
Thank you. So staying on sort of policies, I think Councillor Clark has a few questions. They may not all be able to address this evening, but we'll try to get through some of those. Thank you.
Officers got a sight of them because I sent them last night, so they got them this morning. But I mean, if I refer to Chapter 4, Strategic Policy 3, Settlement Expansion, what is the importance of adding defined in, outside, define the built area boundaries? The previous text just said outside build on boundaries. Why is criterion 1 being deleted in that policy? Basically, the questions I sent in last night, Catherine.
My laptop had decided to turn itself off, so I'm just going back to it. Just bear with me 1 second. It's a bit sensitive. Right. There now. So essentially, yeah, the answer to that question is around. So there's a wider point here around. So one of the things the inspector had asked us to do earlier in the year was to look at the emerging NPPF, which we're expecting to be published either sort of the next couple of weeks or potentially in September. And essentially where he is coming from is that he is wanting to make sure that when we get to a point where the plan is adopted and the new NPPF is out, that we don't have policies in the plan that are immediately out of date. And in terms of that particular policy, there are provisions within the new emerging NPPF which essentially change the context of the policy which we'd submitted in terms of how development on the edge of built-up area boundaries and settlements might be considered. And essentially, that criteria no longer really fits that NPPF, and hence why we've suggested that it be deleted. So that's that one.
May I continue? I won't go into some of the nitty-gritty questions which I've sent you. You can, just answer by email. But I did make a point in Chapter 5, Strategic Policy 7, Appropriate Energy Use, questioning the issue of waste heat, which I don't need answering now, but if you can look at it and come back to me, please. Basically, one general point having worked my way through the policies yesterday, I'm disappointed that I can't find anywhere in the proposed policies or amended policies anything about water quality, i.e. the reduction of CSOs and a desire to improve the water quality either from surface water runoff or runoff from buildings. And why is that? I mean, it's insufficient to say it's Southern Water's problem. It's everybody's problem. And we have to help Southern Water because they can't help themselves. So I wanted to say that I couldn't find anywhere, I may have missed it, anything to do with that topic.
No, I think that's a fair comment. I think the issue that we have is obviously what, in terms of the way that the examination is being undertaken, is what, and obviously it's been very protracted. So we submitted the plan obviously back in 2024, a couple of years ago, and at that point, what we were saying to the planning inspector is we think the plan is sound, and what the inspector has subsequently said to us is that he can only recommend changes that but make the plan, if they are unsound, make the plan sound. So what he hasn't done is to say that, the fact that we're silent on something like water quality is not that we don't care or there are other issues, but what we can't necessarily say is that's absolutely necessary for the plan to be sound in itself. So that's why there isn't any sort of further recommendation. I think what we need to do, which is probably outside of the planning system, is to sort of pick these issues up for the time being. And then also, obviously, we do have the opportunity through the new local plan to see whether there are options as to whether we can take that further. But that's really where we find ourselves.
If I can come back on the point, I mean, the policies are full of, how can I put this, wish lists and things that we want and all the rest of it. So whilst I hear what you say, I don't, why is it that we can't actually put into one of the policies the point that water quality is important? Because our policies are silent on that. And I realise what you're saying is it's a bit like planning permissions. If it's a problem and you can condition it, you can't turn it down. I get the point. But the point I'm trying to make is that we have not said anything about these things, and I think we should. And I haven't even consulted with Councillor Croker on it. I'm sure he would have to say it. But do you see what I'm trying to say?
No, I completely understand. I think the issue is it's probably something that if we were starting now or submitting a plan now, or we would be able to weave into those wish lists. But effectively, the inspector's position is, I think, likely that actually that's not something that's needed for the soundness of the plan. What I would say, though, is that obviously if it is agreed to publish for consultation, these are points that actually could be made to the inspector, that because obviously ultimately now it's his consideration rather than for us, and therefore that's something that I would sort of encourage potentially that is taken as an approach.
Well, perhaps if we don't include it in this one, we can include it on the next one, which is following hard on their heels. In the detail, I mean, on page 22, paragraph policy 6.16, which is very detailed, I've made my points, my concerns about NOx and the A272 and the MENS. If you could look at it and come back, please, that would be great. I wouldn't expect it to be at this committee. There was basically several other points. Sorry, I've lost my place. There's a table which was being proposed to be deleted. I thought that table should be kept because I think it's quite useful. On chapter 9, paragraph 9.11, tables are a very useful way of picking up data rather than having to trawl through mountains of text. So that's another one. Chapter 9, Strategic Policy 20, New Employment, Criterion 3. By changing the wording in the way proposed, I may be wrong in this, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to restrict retail outlets to towns and villages and not allow out-of-town settlement shopping. Is this what was meant by rewording the policy? Is this something that we wish to do? Because in the following paragraph, 920, at the end it says that retail can be outside of town village centres, as it says should, not must. And I refer to paragraph 9.20 SP30. So that's something that, is that something you wanted to do? Is that something that we want to do?
So I think that there's a couple of points which I might need to come back to in further detail, but I would just say in terms of the one on the table, essentially, because we've obviously had a plan that's effectively 2 years older than we would expect it to be examined under, a lot of that information is sort of now out of date. And actually the feedback I've had from officers in the team is that, and from DM as well, is that actually if you've got that information that goes out of date in the lifetime of a plan, that can potentially be confusing and potentially undermine or complicate if there's an appeal sort of down the line. So rather than having those snapshots, it's perhaps easier to have them sort of available as part of planning decisions, which was the rationale behind that. And I will come back to you, I think, on the point of the retail in detail.
Thank you. My final sort of point is chapter 9, Strategic Policy 20, New Employment, chapter 9, Strategic Policy, which is enhancing existing employment, etc. Just trivial detail, but there's no mention of here in the listings of industrial estates. There is no mention of the industrial estate in Pulborough on the A29 and Hill Farm Junction, which is a bit surprising because that is being expanded as we speak at the moment. There's a planning application in on that one. And there's no mention of the two new ones in Billingshurst, the one in the north of Billingshurst and the one in the west in Billingshurst. So presumably that's an omission and will be corrected, or maybe they're too small or too new.
I think it's the latter. They're too small and too new, and obviously it's therefore you would probably pick that up in a future review.
Okay, well, I've just flagged it in. Thank you for your patience.
Question on policy, Councillor Brown.
Just something that Councillor Clark has triggered is you mentioned water quality, but let's not forget we are still under water stress in our region, and that's not my words, that's Southern Water, and they've mentioned that water scarcity is real and it's on our doorstep. As soon as 2030, water demand could exceed supply. And I suspect we might find ourselves in a similar scenario about water neutrality in the future. However, my question here is, we've mentioned we've withdrawn water neutrality, but should we not make reference to the use of 110 litres per person per day?
I'll answer that. I might pivot to the earlier question to perhaps explain why we haven't got particular measures on water quality too. The NPPF, as we know, is changing. The draft policy of the new NPPF, which is DM7, what it says that we should assume that existing environmental regimes, sorry, I can see Councillor Alice Brown can't hear me, but we should assume and not take over through planning policy that other regimes are effective, and indeed question 29 of that related consultation mentions specifically water quality, so that would help explain why the inspector hasn't pushed us that way. With strategic policy, I think it was 9, which was water neutrality. Yes, we have amended that, but we have reverted back to our optional standards. I don't think there are additional main modifications. I think they've already been made. So yes, we want to go to the optional standards, which are 110, and indeed may be strengthened by government proposals whenever the government get round to make those. But yeah, we are aware of that.
Thank you. I have another question on another policy. Is that okay? Yes, it's MM 176. Doesn't necessarily be answered this evening because I have put the question in. There seems to be various numbers of pitches required in the local plan. We have 74, we have 109, we have 90, and in the open research that was done, we need 80. Could we be absolutely certain and check what that figure is? I don't need to tell me now, I'm sure, unless you've got it at your fingertips, which you may have. But I think we need to be absolutely accurate on this. And I also noticed that you've then taken out the identified gypsy and traverse needs for the first 10 years, where we had that before. The first 10 years we had to meet 50, and we're pretty close to that now. Well, we're at 42. I know the MM 176 is 35, but since the first we've had, and that's another conflicting figure because we have a committee report that says 38 prior to this, and now we just need the accuracy. What is the actual figure? What do we have today? And what are we looking to do within the local plan? I think that's all I would ask. We get that accurate figure.
It's a fair question. So gypsy and traveller needs are unlike, I suppose, standard residential needs in that we essentially take detailed field work, not far off a census of the community. That was undertaken, I think, midway in 2023. And what that found by our consultants is that there was the need, forget about the supply for a second, the need was 79 pitches for those who meet the planning definition. We also noted 29 pitches for households who don't meet the definition, and up to 20 pitches for those where we didn't know whether they met the definition or not. And that's could be for multiple reasons: refusing to answer questions, not being on site at the time that the survey, and so on. So collectively, my maths isn't great, but I believe that adds up to 128. And thank you for your questions in advance. With the table that you refer to, which I think is a mixture of 176 and 178, the main modifications, the 90 is the allocations that we seek to provide. However, in reality, that's 74 net, because some of the sites already have pictures on them or have planning permission or whatever. So we're adding, through this proposed plan, 74 pitches to the district supply. You are also correct that obviously we have existing commitments, just like we always have existing housing commitments and employment commitments. And you're right, that's always sort of a snapshot of when we wrote the document. So we're quite clear that it's as of the 1st of June, there were 35 pitches approved. I know there have been recent pitches approved too. So when added together, that amounts to 109 pitches. What we say, what we will be saying to the inspector, subject to cabinet approval, is that that meets the entire needs of those who meet the planning definition, also those where we don't know, and it does provide that sort of buffer or headroom to ensure the resilience that our inspector seems to enjoy, which seems to be around 10%. So we think it's a sufficient sort of policy framework for meeting gypsy traveller needs. But I accept the point that there have been recent approvals too that this doesn't reflect.
Just to go back on, sorry, just to go back on a previous point, just to clarify on the water efficiency measures. So the MM59, which is in the report, does go back to requiring no more than 110 litres per person to be used in that change. So it's within the.
Thank you. It was late in the evening when I was reading it. I just want to raise a little concern here that we do have a significant number of unauthorised but tolerated sites. And I wonder if there's a risk that although we plan to have 109, or whatever it might be, the figure within a local plan, that we may, but then that's not an issue, is it? No, sorry, I'll withdraw that question. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry.
Councillor Clark would like to come on a similar issue.
Thank you. That was a very interesting presentation on where the numbers are at. But what is missing from that is the point that Councillor Ellis-Brown was bringing up, is that we have a number of unauthorised illegal pitches that need to be mentioned in this. And I have brought this matter up with the Director of Place, and Director of Place is dealing with it with myself. So there is more, how can I put this? It's the wrong term, resource to boost the numbers if we wish to. But that wasn't mentioned in what you said, and I thought it needed to be said so that members are aware. Thank you.
Anything else on policies before we move on to sites? Okay. Councillor Ellis-Brown actually submitted his questions first, so I'll start with that. I think one of the first points I noticed in relation to the strategic sites, Ava saying about the rail crossing, Buck Barn, about education and development quality, was in the change of the previous descriptors. And I think that's also echoed with what Councillor Clark has said, so we can join those 2 points together, where I think you said the new text builds up Ava saying in the descriptions. So would somebody like to please comment on that?
I'll start off. Essentially, I think we're in a position where obviously we were tasked initially by the inspector of going back and looking again at, so we've looked at around 100 additional sites that were already joining built area boundaries or the strategic sites. And what we've had to do is to look at what has changed, if anything, in the last 2 years. You know, the inspector was very clear as to, you know, can those issues be overcome? Can they be mitigated? And clearly, therefore, what we've had to do is to go through, you know, in the case of Advertame, for example, that, you know, there has been a sort of a clear change in terms of the fact that, you know, what the county have reflected back to us is that whilst there are, you know, significant issues with schooling in the Weald, there is the potential for that site to obviously provide new land for a school. That school would then obviously help provide mitigation to the existing problems in the area that it's being generated, and clearly therefore what that will then do is to then lead to changes within the assessment methodology. You know, quite frankly, you know, different people will read them depending upon their own particular, you know, we've gone through as officers, that's our professional judgment. Different people obviously will have different opinions on that, and that is why you have the consultation, if it is agreed, where those measures can be put forward to the inspector, although those queries and feedback.
I just want to clarify, when I did send my questions in, they were put forward on the basis that we have a local plan and we're in a strong position to resist any legal challenge. That's why I've raised those points. I just wanted to make that clear. I know it's keen that we get a local plan. Very keen that we have a local plan, because it then, I hope not all the time, but it would ensure that the tilted balance doesn't apply. But there are exceptions, and I appreciate that.
Councillor Hayes-Brand, sorry, I summarised the change in descriptors that you were raising with Avasane and Buckbarn. Is there anything else you wanted to raise before we move on to somebody else about the issues you'd raised about those two strategic sites?
I think, yes, the key one for me is, and I asked the question in there, when we did the traffic assessment, did we take on board the 235 houses that are coming to Pulborough? 170 at News Place Nurseries, 65 at Greendean, both very close or not, if not adjacent to the A29. And then we have a further 30 by the station, and we actually have 2 developments right on Church Hill. So my question is, for 2 questions. One, did we take into consideration when we did the modelling of those sites? And secondly, I read somewhere we're going to mitigate some of this at the mini roundabouts at the bottom of Church Hill. And I'd be very interested to understand how we are going, not necessarily have to respond this evening, how we are going to mitigate that at the bottom of Church Hill, which I just trying to find the wording, exact wording, which I find absolutely astonishing, but that it's already over capacity, but because it's only minimum, and that's with or without the development, it's only going to be minimum. It's already over capacity, but over capacity will only the additional traffic will only have a minimal impact on something that's already over capacity. I find that rather strange. If it's over capacity, then it's over capacity.
I mean, the short answer is we've taken the study. Consultants have done that study. I'll pass it over to Matt, who's worked closely with them. But yes, those sites have been incorporated. But in terms of some of the detail, I'll pass over.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, just to, as Catherine just said, yeah, I did go back and because we obviously had the benefit having had sight of your question in advance, and I did go back and check on those sites. I can say that they were included. So basically, when so these are the sites that you're asking about. Well, that they're sites that have permission. Were they included in the transport assessment and the traffic modelling? The answer is yes. The consultants we feed them the information, all of the committed sites that we that have already got permission, and then that kind of gets, if you like, layered on to the sites that we're then testing for coming forward through the local plan. The one thing to qualify that with is sometimes you'll get sites. So obviously this work was done a few weeks ago now. We keep kind of getting more and more sites gaining permission. I don't know exactly when the permissions were granted for some of the sites you're referring to, say on Church Hill. And so I can't absolutely guarantee that every single one, but I certainly know that the big site at New Place Farm, that was definitely included as a commitment, as was the Greendean site as well. So hopefully that reassures you on that technical point. And then you raise the issue of, I think, looking for assurance on the mitigation at Church Hill and the mini roundabouts. I think you've kind of, as you've just said, Councillor, what the evidence is showing is that the local plan developments, the sites that we propose to come forward, have an impact, but they don't, when compared with what we call the reference case, which is, you know, the kind of, if you like, do nothing. If we had no development sites put into the local plan at all, what would it look like in 2040? And then you compare that with what does it look like in 2040 with all the development sites in the local plan, and there actually isn't a huge amount of difference. So what we are not unfortunately able to do through the local plan is you know, you use that as a way of mitigating essentially problems that are occurring irrespective of the local plan. That's just not something that we can really do. There is some impact, so there is some increase compared with, if you like, the do nothing, and as I think you've also correctly identified in the questions submitted, there is very limited options for making physical mitigations to that particular location because of the narrow road, because of the buildings close by. So I think that just kind of puts the imperative on when we see the applications coming in, and particularly thinking about the Adversane site, we need to make absolutely sure that they are doing absolutely everything to get as many people using sustainable modes as possible. The travel planning element, and so forth. What's another thing that's quite interesting about the A29 at Churchill is that we're not actually seeing the evidence seems to be saying that traffic generated by all the new developments, not really much of it is actually due to come down. Won't be coming down the A29 through Pulborough anyway. There will be obviously some, but the majority of those traffic movements will be going more towards the north, probably because of the draw of Gatwick, Crawley, Horsham Town, etc., etc. So, with that, again, we sort of have, because of that, we have limited kind of recourse to try and sort of do loads using the vehicle of the local plan to kind of mitigate that situation. So I think that's probably all I can say at the moment.
Thank you. No.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a number of comments to do with the looking at Adversane. Basically, the new text indicates a lower level of delivery in the plan period than the original summary of proposal, which is fine. A major concern I have is, in the summary, is an assumption that the employment land will deliver the sort of jobs that are attractive to new residents. In view of the type of employment buildings and types proposed, I would argue this is unlikely. The social and economic makeup of the district would indicate a low level of resident uptake of these local jobs, and Adversane becoming more of a dormitory town. I mean, this is truer the further away from Crawley and Gatwick that you get. As you indicated yourself, new developments, the traffic tends to head up the A29, heading north. If you look at the traffic mitigation proposed, it states specifically 5 Oaks and the 272 A24 junction, which surprises me a bit, because there's no mitigation, and I understand why, because there's no land to carry it. To do it is the A29, A2, A3. I strongly recommend you consult the Pulborough Transport and Infrastructure Plan paper, which was published in July 2025, of which you have a copy, because it'll give you chapter and verse on the issues in Pulborough to do with traffic. But one thing key for me is the removal of the sentence that states, concern is raised that private vehicle usage will be higher than predicted, and this is shared by West Sussex County Council as highways authorities. This is quote the text. So can you please explain how this concern has gone away and justify the move from unfavourable to neutral in the classification? That's my first question.
You'd like to take that one? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just finding my notes on this. Just bear with me.
Okay, the text I quoted came from the original document before the new document, if you see what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to say that the mitigation, you need to look at the junction north of Billingshurst and the Billingshurst bypass, which is very, very solid in the rush hour. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, I'm just consulting my notes here. So the removal of the sentence for concern. I think, sorry, just bear with me. We've had a lot of questions to try and deal with. Let's just go off the cuff. It's too complicated otherwise. So sorry, the question was concerning the if you like, the conflict with the Pulborough transport plan and the findings there, wasn't it? I think essentially that was your question.
What I quoted was in the original submission.
Yeah.
The concern is raised that private vehicle usage will be higher than predicted, and this is shared by West Sussex County Council Highways Authority. That sentence, which is key in my opinion,
has disappeared
in the new version. And somehow it's gone from unfavourable to neutral, and I don't understand why that would be the case.
Yeah. So, sorry. Yeah. So, essentially we've had to kind of, you know, sort of there's been sort of further evidence that's you know, we kind of had to reassess in having better knowledge of the sites that are coming forward to us, and obviously we've had the additional transport information as well, so we've had to take account of that, but essentially there are some benefits that we've had to recognize, some, you know, more positive things we've needed to recognize in terms of say the site at Adversane, for example, proximity to Billingshurst rail station, and also there are, you know, as we are now starting to more properly understand, great benefits to the safety improvements arising from the changes to the railway crossing and the removal of the level crossing at that point. So yeah, essentially it's just a kind of recalibration, if you like, when comparing across the board with other sites. Sorry.
Are you saying there's sort of an evidence base to that? I mean, it does sound a little bit like reverse engineering. You want a decision, and then the descriptors are changing to suit.
No, I think just to clarify on that, in terms of the transport assessment work that's been done, I think one of the things that actually came as a bit of surprise to us as officers as well is that really there have been changes really post-COVID in terms of the transport movements that people make. So actually, because of people working from home, there are effectively there are lower journeys. So actually, the impact of the plan as a whole is lower than we would have necessarily have thought, and therefore when you're looking at the impacts, you know, so certainly when we were looking at the plan, you know, 2 or 3 years ago, when you were looking at places like Adversane, clearly, you know, it was showing that there was more of an impact on that road than there was. So obviously that's been downgraded. We've been looking at, you know, also what the site promoters have been suggesting on that site. Obviously they're saying that they would be updating the public transport, and that's come through much more strongly in that intervening period. So obviously you've got those links back up to Billingshurst, and particularly in the train station, and therefore you're able to therefore pick up that proximity and those benefits, and therefore that's what's led to that change.
Councillor Clark, would you like to summarise your points?
I have three other points which I will make summary. At public meetings in the last month, the document says that the developer is going to provide a secondary school in your documentation. In public meetings, the developer has stated that they will provide the land for a secondary school, but not a school. So you may want to check back with a developer. The next issue is to do with NHS ICB. And the Billingshurst practice is quite full. I'm sure that Councillor Trollope will concur with that, and Pulborough is pretty full as well. So there's a concern there about the medical side of things. And finally, the assumption in the papers is the market can absorb both east of Billingshurst as well as Adversane. The study only does this on viability grounds, and it implies the market can absorb both east of Billingshurst and Adversane, but that's only because our modelling assumes a distributed long-term delivery and strong value zones. The real constraint isn't viability, but it's absorption rate, phasing and competition between the strategic sites. This seems to be ignored in this plan. The report does not model absorption rates. It is based on several baked-in assumptions, namely, strategic sites deliver over many years, multiple large greenfield sites can run concurrently because our value zones have strong GDVs. 35% affordable housing is fine, and residual land values remain at 15 to 35 times EUV, meaning developers had headrooms even with policy costs. So that's underpinning our strategy. But the foundation for saying that market can absorb multiple strategic sites, but not the absorption, is covered in this, and we haven't had the final paper, as I understand it anyway, from the developers. And concern is expressed in the Horsham Local Plan Sustainability Appraisal essay, non-technical summary addendum as well, as to the absorption of this. So I think there is something there that needs to be looked at. Thank you, Chairman, for your patience.
Thank you.
I'll start. I'm sure others will chip in. We do have a housing delivery study update which focuses solely on deliverability and market absorption, and what it indicated that the market could accommodate development, taking account of other development in the area, and the delivery rate recommended by our consultants or that adjustment has been reflected in the trajectory we've put forward. So we do have evidence that says that level of development can be accommodated. On education, obviously we weren't at that public meeting, but it is a clear requirement in the policy that the promoter provide land and contributions for a secondary school, which will both meet the needs generated by the development itself, as well as helping to address capacity issues that was referred to earlier. How the school is delivered ultimately will be determined during the application stage, and I've no doubt that you've reflected accurately what the promoters have said, but it will really involve closely liaison with the LAA, as there's different mechanisms of how a school gets delivered. On health, I think our view is that the assessment that we've made is fair, notwithstanding, and we've recognised that initially a health centre is very unlikely to be provided, but over time we think the delivery of the health centre to meet both the needs and potentially wider needs is beneficial. And I'd add further that the site is, or the proposal is quite compact, with walkable and sustainable sort of means of travel around the site. So it should promote healthy lifestyle. So I think as officers, we view the assessment in relation to the health criteria, as written to be fair.
Councillor Clark, did you have anything else on that? Briefly, just to make sure everyone else gets an opportunity to speak.
No, but I'll hold my peace for the time being.
As Brown, quickly, I just want to make sure everyone gets a chance.
Thank you. We are hogging the microphone. My question firstly is, what negotiations have taken place with Network Rail, if any? And we have a railway line goes through this site, and it, choosing my words carefully, it splits the site. So how will you get from one part of the site to the other part in crossing the railway?
Again, I'll go for it first. This has been probably the area of most discussion over the last few months with the promoter, ourselves, Network Rail, and indeed we understand County Council colleagues. They do have agreements in place to, this is between the promoter and Network Rail, to sort of bring forward the design and delivery of the railway bridge. So you're absolutely right, the site is bisected on its western side by the Arun Valley line, and it has always been an issue, the railway bridge, but to be fair, this is probably something that has evolved quite a lot since the position in, well, I can't remember when this was, 2021 or 2023 when this was considered by Cabinet and Council previously. So we do have further confidence that they're going through the correct process to get delivery of the site, which will be crucial. I think we all completely agree. And referring to Matt's comments before, communication we've had in meetings and indeed in writing from Network Rail have really stressed their view that the railway bridge and the related closing of the existing level crossing would have a benefit for the railway system at large, which clearly is in the interests of Network Rail to pursue.
How will I get from one part of the site to the other part of the site across the railway line if I'm walking?
The bridge wouldn't just be for vehicles, it would be pedestrian and cycle bridge as well. Sorry, I probably should have started there.
My misunderstanding. Okay, but there will be a footbridge that takes you from one part of the site to the other part of the site.
That's correct, Councillor. It's a railway bridge for multi-modes.
Sorry to interrupt you. My concern is that they were going to put just a footpath across the railway.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and that, and if they did that, they would have the train horn, and that train horn has to be heard at 90 decibels at 100 meters. That's going to be pretty nice for the people living near the railway. But if you'll tell me they're putting a bridge over, then you've answered my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, just for transparency, so we can see all the questions that have been raised, Councillor Fisher, who's not here, has raised a question with Barbara with regards to Backs Close, which has been included in the new plan, but is awaiting appeal decision. I know that you've been answering those questions. Councillor Trollope, thank you for submitting questions in advance regarding the Avasay proposal, not including a nature reserve in line with the Jubilee Fields at Billingshurst and cycle safety routes for children. Would you like to elaborate on that for your question?
Yes, so I can't remember the exact wording of my question, but it was basically the west of Billingshurst proposal offered a nature reserve, offered significant improvements in Jubilee Fields, offered various other inducements, including the community centre. Whereas it's not an adversarial, so it's really just to try to get a justification for the fact that we are not going to be going with the Billingshurst West, which is very popular in Billingshurst, and we're going to go with adversarial, which is less popular in Billingshurst. It's just really giving me words to explain it to people in Billingshurst in words that they understand.
Yep, we can do that. So really, I think sort of some of the reasons we've already touched on this evening, but I'll sort of circle back to those in a minute. Obviously, we've talked about the huge scale of development that we've been tasked with finding in terms of the numbers. So if you look at what's proposed at the West of Billingshurst site, it's sort of the order of magnitude is about 1,000 to 1,500 homes, whereas obviously the land at Adversane is significantly larger. It's about twice that, around 3,000, 3,200, I think. And clearly, in terms of the need to hit what the inspectors asked us to reach in making a sound plan, we just don't get that with that single allocation, additional strategic allocation at west of Billingshurst. So there is sort of basically a maths answer to that one as the sort of starting point. The other issues obviously go back to, we've talked about the fact that the secondary school at the Weald is approaching capacity, and whilst land at Adversane itself is able to provide certainly land for school and provide contributions towards it, that then obviously can help offset that problem. You get the opposite with development at the west of Billingshurst. They're not proposing an additional secondary school. So actually you compound the problem rather than making it worse. So whilst they've got other things that they're proposing on the site, which we don't deny are very positive, it doesn't solve some of the very significant problems that we have in terms of, well, actually, where do children go to school? We do not want to be in the position where, the children will be bussed miles elsewhere, potentially outside the district to get to school. And that would be something that potentially could happen, essentially. So those are the sort of two key drivers, really, and I'll stop there.
Anything else, Councillor Trollope? You happy with that?
No, sorry, no, I mean, it is still going to be a very hard sell. Particularly as I believe that east of Billingshurst is still within our plan. And east of Billingshurst is very much less popular than west of Billingshurst. I think it's also because of the impact on Docks Woods in Billingshurst, and I know that there's a large movement of people in Billingshurst are very upset about this.
It's worth saying, I think, that there are a number of allocations, obviously, that were already in the plan. So east of Billingshurst is one of them, Southwater is another. What the inspector did not say at any point is, effectively what we've done is to already submit the plan. We were saying that those sites were sound. Clearly there will be a hearing session in the autumn where those sites potentially will be examined, and that certainly seems to be the likelihood. But certainly at the moment there isn't any assumption that we would go away and completely change the strategy. It was finding additional sites rather than changing the ones that were already there.
Okay, thank you. I did have an additional question, if I may. So I'm glad that we've been talking a lot about the train infrastructure and the railway crossing, because of course that's very important for the safety. But equally, I'm conscious that in terms of having I know we've talked about it, and I think it's been discounted, of actually having a train stop at Adversane is not really desirable because it's such a short distance to Billingshurst. I'm not sure if it's in there or not. But the question is it is very cyclable. But Adversane to Billingshurst by bicycle on the A29, I don't think takes me much more than 10 minutes. So I'm being a bit put off here. So it's just, I wanted to see if we can detail the steps that we can take to ensure that we have a safe bicycle route from Adversane to North Billingshurst, and also ideally to Polborough as well, because it's not that far from Polborough. So
I think it's one of those things. They're ongoing discussions that we would need to have with the site promoter. Is something that we're very keen. We're now in a position where we obviously have a new active travel officer within the council to pick those things up. But they are more matters of detail. We obviously have reflected the need for active travel within the policies, but precisely where a route would go and how that might be achieved, I think is probably a little bit too much detail for an overarching planning policy.
Councillor Trollope, have you finished now? Your mic's on.
sorry, I am finished, and I thought my mic was off.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Just to set Councillor Trollope's mind at rest, if you look at the Pulborough infrastructure transport plan, there is a plan there to take a cycle route from Pulborough up to that sort of site. It's the first one, and of course don't forget you've got Marindine Road as well to look at.
Sorry, you still have the B12, whatever it is called, which is to get across, and it's quite a dangerous road.
Members, I just want to say that I'm mindful of the time this evening, and we can't really take a break mid-discussion point. The following items 9, 10 and 11 will be very short, so if you're okay, we'll just carry on. Do any other members of the committee have comments? As if they don't. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair. Very quick point. We were just on conversations about schooling, secondary school provision, and the officers just pointed out, obviously, that we don't want to be in a position where children are being bussed outside of the district. Also, I represent Southwater, and we've got the strategic allocation there, where a secondary school is being considered as part of that. Now we're looking at the potential allocation of Adversane as well, which is also promising, pledging land for similar facilities, and bearing in mind the distance between the two strategic sites is just under 9 miles. Is there a risk here that it could derail either one of those projects? I mean, have we had conversations with the county council about it, for example?
No, so what the county is saying is that what we've been asking them, obviously, if you've got the allocations that were already in the plan, they were saying that you needed a secondary school at both the Crawley site and at Southwater. What they're saying to us is you need another one to meet those needs. It's not instead of, so there's no competition there in that sense.
So just to confirm, the county have confirmed that they wouldn't derail it. Thank you.
Councillor Hogman.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to paraphrase what a few people have said. Councillor Clark was worried about the optics. He was worried about some of the things that we quoted in our previous plans coming back to haunt us and being thrown in our face. And I think I echo that point. Councillor Trollope was concerned about his residents and how he justifies these decisions made to his residents. And Councillor Ellis Brown was concerned about the legal optics and legal challenge that this council can be made. And if I can summarise that, Buck Barn versus Adversane has been a nightmare scenario for the past 6, 7, 8 years. Members of this council and administration have had to choose between two sites, which the public or a lot of people absolutely are flabbergasted and detest both sides. If they're on their doorsteps, there's some element of NIMBYism there, but that's where we are with members of the public, and as councillors, we're going to have to sit there and justify that. And I also aware that both of those developers have got deep pockets, and they are really going to come to town with the presentation as they did last time in front of the inspector. I've seen that a few words in the report, justification, and obviously I've heard the comments, and I guess the council doesn't necessarily want to show its hand, but as a councillor, I'd very much like to see the evidence base, the optics, the almost the Excel spreadsheet as to why one site has been selected over another. And I guess I'm a councillor, and I don't feel that I've seen the change in evidence base. I am incredibly concerned about that railway crossing and Adversane's deliverability. I guess I'm pleased. I was worried that we might end up with both sites in the plan, and I'll be very pleased if we get away with just one of them. So that's the positive. But I just echo everyone's response. I echo the difficulties of that railway track, and that is paramount in my mind. If Eversane goes forward, that has got to be absolutely cast in stone that bridge is going to happen quickly, have permission, and that the evidence base clearly points towards one site, because the developer, the other developer at Thacombe Homes, obviously they are a local horse builder. They have offered to build a school. I mean, I think that was a slight difference, wasn't it? They've offered, as you said, some things and not other things, and different developers have come forward with different things. But if we do get a school in Southwold, we probably don't need a school in Southwold. But I was under the impression that Thacombe Homes had offered to build a school in that site. Not that I'm personally favouring that site, because it was toxic, and a lot of the public absolutely hated it, and we had thousands and thousands of letters of complaint. So as we did about Eversane, so we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. But I echo all three responses that some of what we've got previously in writing, that's on files on the internet, is there for life, and it's going to come back to haunt us. I'm concerned that as councillors, we do need to justify it to our residents, and we do need some form of evidence base. Thank you.
I think our Director of Police will respond on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that the officers have sort of focused very much on the technical side, so perhaps I can give a bit more of a wide-ranging response, which draws back to what the officers were saying. So there are some key things that have changed since the plan was started in its early preparation stage. We're looking at obviously very significantly larger development, and it is right that we have redone and revisited the evidence, the key evidence in terms of transport and the other evidence bases that the team have been referring to. And what that has shown is an absolute change in terms of how people's transport movements. So what it has shown is that Adversane actually has a less of an impact than it had previously, and that's shown in the evidence. It is a more compact settlement that is being proposed, and we were looking at how to minimise the amount of greenfield land that is taken. So that is a significant change. That's because the developers have done very much more work than they had done previously. The issue over the railway crossing, which was very much a concern of all of ours, I think, previously, those conversations are very advanced now, and a completely different place to where we were previously. And the key thing that I think from the county education perspective is the issue on the Weald and how we accommodate children in the district. And I think that the reference that Councillor Jeffrey made about his experience in Southwater has really sort of cemented that with us, that we absolutely don't want our young people being bused significant distances, and therefore we need to take the advice of the Education Authority that the location where it is most needed for secondary school places is in Adversane. And in terms of the specific
delivery of the secondary school, as in the mechanism of that, the team are absolutely right. Whatever the developers might have said in their presentations, and we weren't there, so we didn't hear them, but they are being required to provide the land, as well as a contribution, and there are mechanisms that are well used in terms of bringing that secondary school forward. So I think there are some absolutely really key important things that have changed over the passage of time, and that's because partly the evidence has changed, the developers are much more progressed in terms of accessibility, movement around the settlement, but also movement between the settlements. So having those public transport, those accessible links through to Billingshurst, for example, which those options simply don't exist in Buck Barn. But just focusing on what's changed on Aberystwyth, those are the key bits of evidence that have changed. And just referring back, Councillor Trollope, to your point about Billingshurst, the point that the team were making was that the targets that we've been given are over and above what was in that submitted plan. So it isn't a case of choosing between East and West Billingshurst, for example. What we were tasked to do is what sites are in addition. And what West of Billingshurst simply does not do, it does not provide a solution for secondary school. Indeed, it makes it very much worse. And the connections between the west of Billingshurst and the village are clearly not as sustainable as those to the east. But really, it was the additionality that we were looking at, and there's some very clear differences there. If we're comparing Adversane with west of Billingshurst, there's very clear advantages of the Adversane site. Hopefully that helps us sort of trying to bring the strands together. But obviously, any further questions, happy to help with that.
Councillor Serkis.
I have to say that I find the assertion that the traffic from an Adversane development will go north and not south, I find that somewhat unconvincing. I mean, even if the bulk of it went north, clearly a certain amount of it will go south. And as somebody who lives in the south of the district, we find that we spend more time going east, west and south than we do going north, but probably we're untypical. And there we go. Now, the specific question I wanted to ask, Chairman, is this. My understanding is that in the last 5 years, there have been 37 flood warnings affecting Swan Corner on the A29. The Swan Corner, as I've mentioned in briefings before now, has the capacity and does indeed flood. When it floods, the A29, which is the principal thoroughfare, closes. So I understand there's been 37 flood warnings in 5 years, and I understand there have been 20 flood warnings in the last 3 years. It probably is unfair to ask officers to answer this now, because it requires a bit of research. But my question is, how many flood warnings have there been on the A24 and the A272, which are the relevant principal roads affecting Buck Barn as a site? Thank you.
I'm sure they have that data to hand at the moment. Would somebody like to respond in writing to Councillor Serkis with the information?
I think, yeah, we certainly don't have that data in front of us today, so we can do that.
Is that acceptable, Councillor Serkis, to receive something in writing?
Will that be available before Monday, do we think? Lovely, thank you very much.
Nods, okay. Any other members with a question? He's not a member at the moment, so Councillor Ellis-Brown.
Yeah, I just want to go on record to thank the officers who've done a tremendous job in putting this local plan together in a very, very short time. I think it's been exceptional. I think you've answered the questions tonight clearly, concisely and very professionally. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Have we had all questions asked from the Communities in Place members? Okay.
Just one, whether we might just consider whichever site comes forward, whatever happens, in fact, let's say is whichever site, what can we do and can give consideration to that actually comes forward when it's in the built form that is an exceptional site, something that is very high quality. I know it's a challenge because of viability and the costs associated with building is very going up tremendously, but something that we build that you could go out to the rest of the country and say, if you want to see how to build a new settlement, go down and look at Abersain or Barn or Horsham District Council, whether we can give consideration to how we can make that happen. That's all. It's just something to consider consideration.
Councillor Brandon, if you wanted to mention the design statement again that was agreed December 23, or have you addressed that already? Just off the comment you just
Chair
made.
isn't putting words into my mouth, is she? Yeah, we did agree in December 2023 that we would have a supplementary design statement. Whether we can produce something that is maybe just tailored to whichever site we choose, that might be beneficial in helping us develop a site that we are indeed very proud of. Thank you.
A reminder more than putting words in your mouth. Thank you. I know that Councillor Knoll has questions. Has anybody else from the Finance Committee gone first? Yeah, so Councillor Campbell first and then
I just want to make a comment. There's been a lot of chat about traffic surveys and volumes of traffic. I just wanted to make sure that when if Abersain is considered as a viable, development, that road safety is taken into account as well as volumes of traffic, because that particular stretch of the A29 is a bit of an accident black spot. And one of the things we discussed when we did the Pulborough infrastructure plan was speed limits, changes at various points along that stretch of road. Anyway, that's just a point I wanted to make.
Can I just quickly come in there to say that the Highway Authority, that's their absolute concern, is highway safety. That is their role, to ensure that that happens, and that's who we will take advice from and who we're working closely with and who our consultants were working closely with.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Minto.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the conversation about evidence, and a number of people saying that it's going to be a challenging conversation with residents. Am I still right in thinking and saying that with a plan, certain sites and those sites really only come forward and we have the opportunity to provide and put in conditions, quality of build, water, etc., etc. Without a plan, all of those sites could still come forward, plus others, and we lose the opportunity to provide all of those conditions. So I know it's a hard sell and a difficult conversation, but in reality, all of those sites could be built out differently with maybe suboptimal outcomes if we don't agree a plan, which does make the conversation a little bit easier, and it has made it a bit easier when I've had them. And I wonder if that is still valid and correct, because I don't want to be going out to people with the wrong advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's absolutely the case, and that is why I think the inspector is very eager, I think it isn't too strong a word, to ensure that the plan that he eventually recommends to us for adoption is something that can microphone has gone off, can withstand the 5-year supply going forward. So in other words, he wants to future-proof this, which was why Catherine was making reference to policies in the new MPPF, which hasn't actually been published yet, but we're future-proofing. And it's for that very reason, to make sure that we have an up-to-date plan and to bring forward to sort of stop at I think your phrase was suboptimal development, absolutely, to be able to make the best of the development we have to take.
Thank you for that. And I think we've got a number of examples, haven't we, of sites that have come through that we did decline for a number of major reasons, which were given approval against our wishes and against the wishes of residents. So I think that also is a very good, sorry, bad but good example of why this, whether we like it or not, is the best for the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened very carefully tonight, and I understand it is absolutely crucial for this district to agree a plan now. Without it, we're going to be in such a mess. We're going to have buildings everywhere, and the whole district will fall apart. I also understand why Adversane appears to be the preferred strategic site at the moment. But surely the success of Adversane relies entirely upon the construction of the bridge to join the two parts of the site. And surely we can't go ahead until we get a definitive agreement from British Rail that the bridge can be built. So what is the situation with British Rail? Have we had any form of agreement? We seem to have opinions from the officers saying, oh yes, it's likely to happen, but likely to happen is no guarantee that this site will be a success. We do need a full and final agreement with British Rail to say the bridge can be built. So can we hear now what the situation is with British Rail? Is there an agreement or isn't there?
I'll leap in here and Tal can then come in afterwards if he wishes to. So the discussions with Network Rail are very advanced indeed. We have written correspondence between us. They are working with the developers, and as Tal outlined, there is a very significant benefit for Network Rail for the bridge to be provided. The inspector will be examining the soundness of that evidence, and he will be looking at what evidence which is still being progressed. So by the time we get to the hearings, obviously in October, be even further progressed. And that's absolutely a point, I'm sure, that he will want to examine very closely indeed. So we have sufficient evidence at the moment in terms of recommending the site to you for allocation, because those discussions are very much more progressed than they have been previously. And the inspector, there will be no doubt further progression between now and October. And that is, I'm sure, where the inspector will also focus his discussions.
Anybody else to come back on that, or are you happy, Councillor Knoll?
I thought that we had to make that the Cabinet had to make a decision on this very shortly. And how can they make a decision without firm evidence?
Because the evidence that we have from the discussions is sufficient in terms of allocating land, the principle of allocation of the land. But what you were asking for was a precise legal agreement, and that will take some time to come. But what we have got are the level of agreement that is necessary to give us confidence to be able to identify the land, and that legal agreement, so to speak, will come forward later. We haven't got that in writing at the moment.
Anything else, Councillor Knoll?
One very final quick question then. What happens if the local plan is agreed with Adversane and yet British Rail rescind on their promises at the moment to create a bridge? What happens to the local plan?
So if it is found that, if that is the case, and that might come out of the examination hearings, then the inspector might direct us to do something differently. Alternatively, if the evidence is so robust when we get to the examination that the inspector finds the plan sound, but at a later date, there is some failure in terms of the delivery of that bridge, that will need to be picked up as part of the local plan, the new local plan to 2045, which, as you know, we have already started. So that's the benefit, if I can describe it as a benefit, of having to have a new plan so quickly following on from this existing plan. So it absolutely valid concerns. As I say, the discussions are so far advanced now than they were previously. We have the confidence we would not be recommending it to you for inclusion in the plan if we were not confident of the position that we've got to. But you do have the safety net, if I can describe it like that, of the inspector obviously examining that evidence as well.
Thank you. Councillor Trollope, I think you want to come back on something?
Yes, it's really just in addition to Councillor Knoll's questions about the level crossing. I think you're going to say yes, it is, but the answer is, the question is one level crossing, is one crossing enough? I mean, I'm trying to think of the size of the development, and you have one crossing, but you know, which I presume is going to be in the middle, but I don't actually know that. You know, might we have like a little pedestrian underpass as well, or something? You know, so that, you know, it's not just one crossing.
Your mic off, just so we can get an answer. Thank you.
At the moment, there's only one. I think those are sort of conversations that we can potentially have with site promoters going forward as to what's the art of the possible there. I think it's fair to say that obviously, clearly, those conversations are going on with Network Rail in terms of that bridge. Whether there's options to do other crossings or not, I don't know. I don't know what their thinking is around that at this stage.
But clearly, the allocation that's recommended for inclusion to Cabinet for their consideration on Monday, the evidence supports that one crossing is sufficient for that development, and that is, of course, a multi-use one, so for pedestrians, for cyclists, as well as for vehicles.
So we're just checking dates, and it's a Monday. It's come forward quite quickly, hasn't it? Any other questions? I think we have scrutinised well. I think we all in agreement a plan is really critically important to us in Horsham. So thank you for the time debating that. Yeah, particularly as I think there's a football match on or something tonight, I'm not sure. But and Judy for arranging this at short notice and for your attendance, as well as sort of the large number of HDC officers and cabinet members here. So that was really good. Just to say that time wasn't dictated by us, it's dictated by the inspector, and I think that Councillor Clark wants to come in a little bit about a call-in issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Victoria and I would like to thank the officers for the quick reaction on the submitted questions. Just to point out, just to remind everybody, the timings on this meeting was imposed by an outside external body, so basically we had no choice. And the meeting tonight reflects because the cabinet meeting, which is going to take place on Monday, which was imposed by an inspector. So in view of the timing trajectory, after discussing it with Victoria and agreeing with the monitoring officer, basically we treated this as an urgent matter. That means that we can't call it in, even if we wanted to. This is unusual because of the timings being imposed by a third party. However, I'm sure officers would quite welcome further questions or comments, especially in terms of the policies, and I do say the policies rather than the site allocations, because let us not forget, this is not only about site allocations, which excites the mind, but look at the policies as well, please. And I'll hand back to Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Yeah, so keep those comments coming in. Item number, sorry, Judy.
I think the planners would agree with they've got questions as soon as possible in advance.
So as always, questions in advance is as much as possible, seeing as the cabinet's on Monday. So get those questions in as soon as we can, please. Thank you.
So 10 o'clock tomorrow.
I think it's 10 o'clock.
Okay, we're just checking on the deadline for questions.
By 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Thank you. Item number 9, update from task and finish groups. We have domestic lithium battery and solar panel installations. Councillor Esbrand, is there anything you want to add since our last
No,
meeting?
we haven't met recently, but I'll look back at the minutes and circulate that to members of the committee.
Thank you. Item number 10 is the work programme, pages 13 to 14 of the pack. Table shows our work programme for this committee, 26 to 27. Key points to note are the Southern Water stakeholder team will be attending on the 9th of September. Judy's also sent a link out to all members with key ways to raise sort of scrutiny questions so we get the most out of that meeting as possible. The annual crime and disorder annual update is in a different date in September. From memory, it's the 15th, Judy. Yeah, 15th of September as well. And we also have an update following the launch of the Ada River Recovery Project, which has been put in for January. Dates to be confirmed are the planning enforcement policy and recent issues with regards to gypsy and traveller sites. That date's to be confirmed, but is going to be put on our agenda. And also a peer review update and action plan. Following our last meeting, we were going to have the Bishop Public Realm update for members, but as you know, that's been sort of delayed slightly due to waiting finances. Barbara, do you have anything else on that at the moment?
No, it's very unfortunate that that has been delayed, but we want to be able to give you the fullest possible information, and we're awaiting details on finances.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on our work programme? We're desperate to get home. Okay, item number 11, Cabinet Forward Plan and list of forthcoming Cabinet member decisions, pages 15 to 16 of your pack. Does any member have any questions? Any non-member have any questions? No, thank you very much. Please always, if you have suggestions or things you want to bring forward to your scrutiny committees, please let us know. So I think, I lost my page numbers now. I think we're done. Urgent business, and no urgent business. So, Councillor Trollope.
Apparently England won, but I don't know the score.
2-1.
2-1. Not that anybody's been watching during the meeting. At 7:47, meeting brought to an end. Thank you very much for attending. A safe journey home, everybody. Thank you.